She was 18 years old when the town decided she was finished. No home, no family willing to claim her, no money except $23 folded inside a flour sack. And the one thing she refused to sell: a blacksmith's hammer. The handle was dark with old sweat. The head had been balanced by a dead man's hand. It was the only inheritance Vale had ever been given. So when a broken freight wagon was found half buried in Gallows Wash, everybody in Mercy well saw scrap. Mara saw lumber, iron axles, bolts, a door for the dugout where she had started sleeping. She paid $7 for the salvage claim. $7 for a wreck the men on the ridge laughed at. $7 for a wagon too heavy for one girl to move, too ruined to matter, and too forgotten for anyone important to worry about. But under those warped floorboards was a false bottom. No one had bothered to search, and inside that false bottom was the one thing powerful men fear most. Not gold, not rifles. Paper. The kind with names on it. The kind that turns a respected man into a prisoner. Mara had not been born in New Mexico territory. She had come west in a wagon when she was too small to remember the road, and old enough to remember hunger. Her mother died near the Cimarron. Her father followed 3 days later. By the time the train reached Mercy Well, Mara belonged to whoever was willing to take her. A cousin by marriage put a roof over her head and never let her forget the cost. She slept near the kitchen stove. She hauled water. She mended socks until her fingers cramped. She learned to move quietly through rooms where adults spoke about her as if she were a chair, a broom, a debt. The only place she felt real was the forge at the south end of town. Amos Dake ran it. He was an old smith with a ruined shoulder, a gray beard, and a habit of speaking to iron as if it could answer. Mara first came there to return a bent hinge. Then she came back to watch. Then she came back so often that Amos stopped pretending not to notice. He put her on the bellows before he put a hammer in her hand. "Fire first," he told her. "A bad smith blames the metal. A good one learns what the heat is saying." He taught her to read color in the coals, to hear a flaw in a wheel rim, to set a rivet clean, to draw a piece of iron longer without making it weak. He taught her that strength was not the same as noise. For her 16th birthday, he made her a small rounding hammer with a hickory handle fitted to her grip. Mara did not cry when he gave it to her. She simply held it until her knuckles went white. 2 winters later, Amos took fever. By morning, the forge was quiet. By evening, Reverend Caleb Creed had already found a reason to enter it. Creed was not the loudest man in Mercy Well. That was part of why people feared him. He spoke softly from the pulpit, softly from the doorway of his mercantile, softly from behind the polished desk where half the town came to ask for credit. His church held their souls, his store held their accounts. His hand rested on both. The day after Amos was buried, Creed sent his bookkeeper to Mara with a ledger. The young man would not meet her eyes. He claimed Amos owed back rent on the forge lot, unpaid tithes, supply charges, wagon repairs, coal advances, and interest on all of it. The numbers marched down the page like soldiers. They were neat. They were impossible. They were lies. Amos had paid cash. Mara knew it because she had watched him count it out. But a dead man could not argue. A poor girl could not hire a lawyer. And Creed had signatures from men who liked eating at his table. At the bottom of the page was the offer. If Mara surrendered the forge, Creed would forgive the debt. She had until sundown. Mara read the paper once, then she folded it and handed it back. The bookkeeper looked relieved. He thought silence meant surrender. It did not. She spent the afternoon cleaning Amos's shop. She swept the floor, oiled the tools, wrapped the good chisels in cloth, stacked the scrap iron by weight, because Amos would have hated a careless heap. A clerk from the mercantile came before dark and offered $23. For the tools Creed did not want counted as property of the debt, Mara could have cursed him. Instead, she took the money. She kept only the small hammer. At dusk, she walked out of the forge with a skillet, a blanket, a sack of flour, 2 shirts, a coil of wire, and the hammer wrapped in her coat. She did not look back, because looking back would have given the town something to enjoy. The first night, she slept in an old sheepherder's dugout, 3 miles beyond Mercy Well, where the land dropped into a maze of red dirt cuts and salt grass. The roof leaked dust. The chimney smoked. A lizard had more claim to the place than she did, but it had walls. At daylight, Mara walked the wash looking for useful things. That was when she saw the wagon. It lay on its side in the sand, one rear wheel cracked, tongue snapped, canvas gone, boards silvered by weather. The lettering along the side had faded to ghosts, but she could still make out part of a freight company's mark and the black scar of a burned lantern bracket near the driver's box. Men from town had ridden past it for months. They called it Creed's Folly, because it came from the missing government shipment people still whispered about whenever the marshal was gone. A driver had vanished with cargo bound for Fort Ca. Reverend Creed had led the search himself. Nothing had been found. To Mara, the wagon was not a story. It was material. The iron tires could become hinges, the oak sideboards could become a door, the spokes were hickory, the bolts were square, headed and worth saving. Even ruined, it was richer than anything she owned. She walked back to Mercy Well that afternoon and paid the county clerk $7 for a salvage notation no one else wanted. The clerk laughed while he wrote it. Planning to pull it out by yourself? Mara took the paper before the ink dried. Planning to own what I work for. With 10 of the remaining dollars, she bought 2 pulleys and 50 feet of hemp rope from the store Creed owned. With the last 6, she bought beans, lard, coffee, and salt. The next morning she started. The wash made a theater of her labor. Every sound carried. The scrape of shovel against sand, the groan of old wood, the creak of rope through pulley. By noon, riders had gathered on the ridge. A man called down, "That thing's heavier than your whole life, girl." Another shouted, "Maybe pray it up the bank. Creed might give you a discount." Mara did not answer. She dug the wheels free. She fixed one pulley to a juniper root that had fought its way into stone. She fixed the other to the front axle. Then she drove a cottonwood pole into the ground and used it as a capstan, turning the rope inch by inch, sweating until her shirt clung to her back. The wagon moved so little at first that the men laughed harder. Then it moved again. 3 inches, then 5, then a foot. Mara worked until her palms tore. She wrapped them in flour sackcloth and kept working. She drank from the muddy seep at the bend and ate beans cold from the pot. When the anchor shifted, she reset it. When the rope burned her shoulder, she changed the angle. When the wagon jammed against a stone, she did not scream. She studied the weight, then she persuaded it. By sunset on the second day, the broken freight wagon cleared the lip of the wash and settled onto flat ground beside the dugout. The ridge was quiet. No one clapped. No one apologized. But no one laughed either. Mara slept 10 hours and woke with both hands swollen. Then she began taking the wagon apart. She started with the bed planks. They were thicker than they needed to be, nearly 3 inches. Heavy oak, good wood. But strange for a wagon meant to haul freight over bad road. The first board came loose with a shriek of rust. The second did not. Mara set her small hammer against it and tapped, solid near the edge, solid near the rear. Hollow near the driver's box. She stopped. A floorboard could rot unevenly. A crosspiece could leave an odd sound, but the seam between the planks was too clean. Not rough wagon work, not field repair, cabinet work. She brushed sand from the joint and found a dark pinhead, sized knot, that did not match the grain. She pressed it. Something clicked beneath the floor. The whole forward section lifted half an inch. Mara stared at it for a long breath. Then she slid the pry bar under the panel and raised it. A hidden box ran beneath the wagon bed, lined with tarred canvas and gray felt. Inside were 4 long parcels wrapped in oilcloth, a black iron express tin with a brass plate, and a leather packet stiff from dust. For a moment, Mara forgot the pain in her hands. She unwrapped the nearest parcel. A rifle lay inside. It was not a common trail gun. The stock was polished walnut. The barrel had 8 flats and a deep blue finish. Fine engraving curled across the lock plate like frost on glass. Amos had taught her enough metalwork to know the difference between a tool and a masterpiece. The other 3 rifles were the same quality. The express tin was locked. Mara could have smashed it. Instead, she picked the simple lock with wire and the tip of a file, because a smith learns that every locked thing is only a problem with parts. The lid opened. Gold coins filled the bottom in tight paper rolls. She did not touch them at first. She only looked. Then she opened the leather packet. That was where the wagon stopped being salvage. There was a freight manifest. 4 custom sporting rifles from Abel Klein of Santa Fe, 1 express tin containing $4,800 in gold coin, payment attached to a territorial procurement order. Final delivery, Fort Ca on. The listed receiving agent in Mercy Well was Reverend Caleb Creed. Behind the manifest was a driver's log. The last entry had been written in a steady hand more than a year earlier. Reached Gallows Wash after sundown. Reverend Creed says he will meet me at the lower crossing. He insists no town witnesses are needed. Mara read the line 3 times. The wind moved over the wash. Somewhere above her, a raven called once. The town had believed bandits took the shipment. Creed had preached over the missing driver as if the man's soul were already laid in heaven. Creed had shaken his head at lawlessness. Creed had used the story to ask for a town watch, more authority, more money through his hands. But the wagon had not been robbed clean. It had been hidden badly. And now the proof sat in Mara's lap. The first thought was not joy. It was danger. A man who could bury a wagon, could bury a girl. Mara put the rifles back. She closed the tin. She wrapped the manifest and log in cloth and tucked them beneath her shirt, against the skin where she could feel every corner of the paper. Then she worked faster than before, not at the wagon. At the dugout she built a door from the oak sideboards and hung it on hinges she forged from the wagon's iron tire. She braced the inside with a crossbar thick enough to stop a boot. She raised a floor above the dirt, made a bed frame, cut shelves into the wall, and moved the express tin under a stack of firewood where no one would look first. Every nail she drove sounded too loud. Every hoofbeat on the ridge made her turn. But fear did something useful to Mara. It sharpened her. Within a week, the dugout was no longer a hole in the bank. It was a small, hard shelter with a smith's fire outside and a door that could say no. That was when people began coming down from the town. Not the men who had laughed first, not Creed's friends. The others, a widow named Eliza North, came with a broken kettle handle and a covered pot of mutton stew. She did not ask about the wagon. She only looked at Mara's bandaged hands and said, "Work eats better when it has food." Mara fixed the kettle and left it by the trail the next morning. A freighter named Orrin Bell lowered a water barrel from his wagon on a rope and tipped his hat from the ridge. Later he brought a cracked brake lever and a sack of onions. Then came a farmer with a plowshare, a mother with a stove latch, a boy with a bent trap spring. They did not come loudly. They came at the edge of daylight, leaving broken things and small payments. Eggs, cornmeal, bacon, coffee, a pair of wool socks. Mara mended what they brought. Her work held. That mattered in a country where bad work could kill a mule, break a wagon, ruin a harvest, or leave a family cold. By the end of the month, people had stopped calling her the orphan. They called her the smith at Gallows Wash. But Creed noticed. One Sunday he mentioned from the pulpit that charity could curdle into pride, that wandering young women should seek guidance, that stolen property sometimes wore the mask of salvage. Mara heard the words repeated 2 days later by a boy who did not understand why they mattered. That night, she did not sleep. She knew the evidence could not stay hidden with her. She needed someone whose authority did not pass through Creed's church, Creed's store, or Creed's ledger. Deputy Marshal Harlan Saye came through Mercy Well on the first Thursday of every month. He was a spare man with tired eyes, a sun-peeled nose, and a way of listening that made liars talk too much. Mara waited for him on the lower road as he rode out. She stood in the track with Amos's hammer through her belt. The marshal reined in. "Road trouble? Truth trouble?" Mara said. He looked at her bandaged palms, the dust on her dress, the hammer at her hip. Then he got down from the horse. She led him to the dugout without speaking. Inside, she set one of the rifles on the table. The marshal's expression changed before he touched it. "Abel Klein made this," he said. 4 rifles, a gold tin, a manifest, and a driver's last log. She laid the papers beside the rifle. Harlan Saye read them once like an officer, then again like a man who understood what they meant. When he reached the final line, his jaw tightened. "Where did you find this?" "In the false bottom of the wagon," Creed said. "Bandits emptied." The marshal looked around the room at the door built from salvage wood, the bar across it, the small forge outside smoking in the dusk. "You know what this says." "I know what it says. You also know what kind of man will come looking if he learns you have it." Mara nodded. "That is why I waited for you on the road." The marshal took the rifle, the log, the manifest, and the express tin. He left the other rifles hidden until he could return with witnesses. Before he rode away, he gave Mara a short-barreled lantern pistol and did not make a speech about courage. "Keep your door barred tonight," he said. At dawn, Harlan Saye came back with Orrin Bell, 2 ranch hands from beyond Creed's credit reach, and the county clerk who had laughed while selling Mara the salvage claim. They entered Mercy well before the church bell. Creed was arrested in his own dining room. People later said he tried to smile until the marshal placed the driver's log on the table. Then the softness went out of his face. He looked at the last entry, at his own name written by a dead hand, and for the first time in all his years of speaking for God in Mercy Well, Caleb Creed had nothing useful to say. The charges began with theft of federal property and fraud. They did not end there. When the marshal searched Creed's smokehouse, he found a blood-stained coat sealed in a grain barrel and a freight company's brass tag buried beneath ash. Behind the mercantile, under a loose floor in the storeroom, he found the missing driver's watch. After that, the town's silence broke. Men spoke of land signed away under false debt. Women brought receipts Creed had altered. Farmers produced account pages with interest added in a different ink. For years, Creed had made every person feel alone in their fear of him. The papers from the wagon proved they had never been alone. Territorial court moved slowly, but it moved. The rifles were recorded as evidence. The gold was counted, $4,800, less the fees no official could resist taking. Mara received a lawful finder's award for recovering the shipment and title to the wagon, remains she had purchased before anyone knew their value. But the first thing she bought was not a dress, not land beyond town, not a horse with silver on the bridle. She bought a mistake's forge. The deed changed hands on a gray morning with rain in the air. The same clerk who had laughed over the salvage claim slid the paper across his desk and kept his eyes low. Mara signed her name slowly, not because she did not know how, because this time no one was taking anything from her. She reopened the forge before the week was out. The first day she rehung the old sign. The second, she lit the fire. The third, Orrin Bell rolled in with a cracked wagon shoe and pretended he had not come mostly to see her standing behind the anvil. Eliza North brought bread wrapped in a cloth. A farmer brought coffee. A boy brought 3 bent nails and asked if a smith could make them straight again. Mara looked at the nails in his palm. Sometimes, she said. By winter, the forge had a new roof, a new door, and a second bellows. The anvil rang from sunup to dusk. People who once stepped around Mara now waited for her judgment. Her repairs were clean. Her prices were fair. Her memory was long but not cruel. On a shelf above the workbench, she kept 2 things: Amos's small hammer and one of the rifles from the hidden compartment, unloaded, polished, and resting on 2 iron pegs. Visitors sometimes asked why she kept a weapon in a place built for mending. Mara would look at the rifle, then at the hammer. That one proves what a guilty man tried to hide, she would say. This one proves what a good man left behind. Years later, people in Mercy Well still told the story of the girl who bought a wrecked wagon for $7. They told it like a miracle. Like luck, like gold had simply waited for her. But Mara never told it that way. She knew better than anyone that the wagon had not saved her because it was valuable. It saved her because everyone else had already decided it was worthless. They decided the same thing about her. And in both cases, they were wrong. The wreck had a false floor. The girl had a will of iron, and the truth was waiting under the boards for the first person stubborn enough to lift them.